technology are kind to us.
Right.
So it's just about, I just need to make sure that I have
Mhm.
the volume off so I don't get feedback. Okay. All right. All right. We're good to go. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's good to see you. And as people are still coming in, we're just gonna go ahead and start. I want to welcome Will Monroe Whittle to our meeting this afternoon. Um, Will was introduced to me by our friend Daryl, FMBR member, a mutual friend, who spoke very highly about Will, about your wisdom and
Ah,
your open heart. So I'll just let you know. Um, I'll read Will's bio. Will is a charismatic thought leader and transformational teacher. He's inspired thousands of people to tap into empowering sources of wisdom, transform limiting perspectives, and live in greater harmony with themselves, with others, and the world. After a breakthrough experience at the age of 25, Will dedicated himself to the field of personal growth and development, spending 9 straight years living and adventuring abroad on a quest to explore the roots of consciousness at sacred sites around the world. During this life-changing experience, he discovered universal keys encoded in ancient wisdom, which laid the foundation for his approach to transforming limiting mindsets and leading breakthroughs to expanded states of awareness and heightened well-being. And so he leads seminars, he leads trips. He has a degree in communication studies and business from UCLA. He's a partner and mentor with the Transformational Travel Council and has coached a long list of high-level professionals, inspiring them to excel in their lives and careers. And he lives just north of here in just north of San Francisco. Um, and so I want to thank you, Will, and welcome you. And just, kind of tell the story about how Daryl, who's on the call and is FMBR member, he and I traveled to Peru was it a year ago? In October, we went to the
hmm.
Amazon.
Yeah.
But just feeling the deep spirituality in Peru is so healing. And um, one of the things we were talking about as a theme for this year is we really want to present people who can give us tools to navigate change as we evolve, as humanity collectively and we individually are evolving our consciousness and
Yeah.
raising our frequency. So I'm so glad that you're here to give us this wonderful indigenous perspective and bring ancient wisdom to us. So thank you and
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you, Judy. It's wonderful to be here. I love what you said. Yes, I had
Right.
a nice connection with Daryl. Uh, he mentioned that he had been to Peru with you, and I think we share a common love of deep connection within each other, deep connection with the people around us, and deep connection with the world that we live in. And that's something that can be missing in our lives. And so a lot of what I do is I help people connect more deeply within themselves, but also in their relationships and the world around them with greater purpose. When we connect deeply within ourselves, that changes everything about the way that we treat each other and the way that we treat the world. And so today we're going to learn a little bit about a perspective. We're just going to scratch the surface, if you will, of an Andean perspective. We're going to learn a little bit about a deeply held principle that the Andean people, we'll talk about the ancient Incas and modern day Q'ero community high up in the Andes Mountains. I've spent a little time with them. We'll talk about a principle that's helpful in terms of connecting us within ourselves, but also with this greater world. And so I want to just jump right into it by asking you all to consider, when I say the words sacred Peru, because the name of this talk is Life Lessons from the Andes of Sacred Peru. When I say the word sacred Peru, what comes to mind for you? Like what kind of imagery comes into your head? Sacred Peru. What's one thing you think about? What's maybe the first thing that pops in your mind or that fills your heart? And so You can think to yourself. Okay, Judy. I just looked at the chat window. Judy says Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu. And I love it. I think for a lot of people, when they think of sacred Peru, they think of Machu Picchu, right? Machu Picchu is an incredible place. In fact, I'm actually going to bring up a little look at Machu Picchu. You know, when you experience Machu Picchu at the right time of day before the crowds arrive at daybreak, looking out from a vista point like this one, I mean, you get to experience Machu Picchu with the five senses. And you can kind of feel this energy there. You feel an energy that emanates down from the mountain peaks that the Inca so revered. Or to watch a condor take flight from the highest peak above the Machu Picchu ruins here, Huayna Picchu, and to soar out over the valley below to the sound of the Urubamba River rushing below, 1,600 feet below you. It's a truly magical experience. And yet when you're there, there's a feeling that no picture can ever convey. You know, in my experience, and I must say that Machu Picchu never disappoints when experienced under the right conditions. What I mean is early in the morning, when you have some space to yourself. Almost every time I've been there, I felt this sense of oneness, this sense of connection, this deep connection to nature. And from that perspective, from that state of awe, that state of wonder, you begin to see the entire ocean in a dewdrop. Or as the Inca might have said, you sense the sun behind the sun. Now, when you're there, experiencing all of this beauty in one place, one of the first questions that hits you, and one of the first questions that hit me years ago, nearly 20 years ago, when I was there for the first time, was, why? Who were these people? You know, why would they come all the way up here? Why would they build this up here? But then as you get to know something more about the Inca, you start to understand a little bit about their worldview. The question is not, why would they build it here? But why would they build it anywhere else? Because to know a little bit about the Inca is to understand this worldview where humanity and nature were interconnected and in some ways inseparable. A worldview in which everything in nature, the natural world, was sacred. And to begin to see Machu Picchu as a symbol of this perspective. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the people who built Machu Picchu. You know, we know they were called the Incas, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about them. But first, I just want to ask, you know, if I say the words, the Inca people, what do you think of? Because I remember I first started learning a little bit about the Inca people in, I don't know if it was grade school or it was in my, you know, it was in my schooling when I grew up. But if I say the Inca people, what comes to mind for you? You might just consider that. Maybe type it in the chat window. What do you think of the Inca people? What images form in your mind? From your own personal experience or maybe from your own schooling? I'll just say one thing I remember learning when I was in school, for example, was that the Inca built the largest pre-Columbian empire the world had ever seen. At its height, the Inca Empire was 10 times larger than the Aztec Empire, with twice the population. I also remember learning about this amazing empire that was interconnected with roadways. In fact, the Inca Empire at its height was about 3,000 miles long from north to south. That's longer than the entire contiguous United States from east to west. It is estimated that about 14,000 miles of roads intertwined and interconnected the Inca Empire. And that's amazing when you think about all of the ups and downs, much of which was in the Andes Mountains. And to think that they did all of this with no wheel and no writing, it's astounding. So I'm going to pop up a little something here. There's a look at one of the roads I was just talking about. This is actually a path in Machu Picchu. There's another road. This is pretty spectacular up in the cloud forest. You can see a little hint of the Urubamba River down below past this mountain of Putucusi there on the left. Here's a look at one of our groups on retreat, getting to explore a little bit of this roadway. You can see how steep it is as they're coming down. And here's something else. Here's something else that the Inca were famous for. Any idea what this is? What in the world is that?
Textiles, yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's made out of cloth, so it looks a bit like textiles. You see these strands or strings that are coming down. This is actually meant to be held out straight, and these strands hang down, and you can see that there are knots that are tied at varying levels, strings of varying lengths, actually varying colors. A lot of it's faded out right now. And so one question, it's called the quipu. And so one question is, what's the quipu for? What's it used for? Quipu. Anyone ever heard of one of these or seen one of these? Some of you may have. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, there was no written language in the Inca Empire. And so the Inca kept records by tying knots at different levels. Some scholars believe that quipu were actually a tactile mnemonic device that they would actually touch, and they would remember narratives, or perhaps jog their memory for poetry that was passed on through the ages. We really don't know. And we've lost the ability to read them. They were once read by quipu kayamaks, who, of course, are no longer with us. And so what a lot of these things have in common, and by the way, I was going to say, these things are amazing, right? What the Inca accomplished is, it's incredible. But what a lot of these things have in common is that they are achievements of the Inca, right? Because in my experience in the modern world, when we learn about history, we have a tendency to learn about history from the standpoint of isolated events or achievements. And that says a lot about the way that history from the modern perspective is recorded and passed on. Our orientation is typically to learn about things out there. But to really learn about the Inca is to go beyond events and achievements, to ask yourself and to ask ourselves, how did they see the world from the inside out? What was their worldview? And how did that differ from the worldview of the European conquistadors who came in, conquered the Inca, and replaced their worldview with their own? And what does that have to do with us challenging or transcending the inherent limitations of our own worldview so that we can live with greater happiness, harmony, and flow in our own lives today? And so we're going to talk more about the Inca. The word Inca, the word Inca actually means Lord or chief in Quechua. So the Inca was the Inca ruler, but the Inca people are also called the Inca people, the Inca. And all Inca people believed themselves to be direct descendants of the sun in the sky, direct descendants of the natural sun. They called themselves the children of the sun. Mythical detail is kind of hard to come by, as it relates to the Inca, because there wasn't any written records, like I said. But one account of their creation myth comes to us from a mestizo scholar by the name of Garcilaso, El Inca Garcilaso de la Vega. And it goes something like this. The sun Inti felt sorry for humans, and thus he sent two of his children, a son and a daughter, to Earth to teach humans how to work the fields, raise livestock, and live like civilized human beings. And so in this way, the first Inca ruler, Manco Capac and Mama Ocllo, emerged from the depths of Lake Titicaca, high in the Andes Mountains, today on the border between Bolivia and Peru. And upon their birth from these primordial waters, he gave them a golden staff. And he told them that they should go on a quest to establish their homeland wherever that staff should sink into the ground. And it was said that that happened just outside of Cusco, the current city of Cusco. The staff sunk to the ground, and there they founded the beginnings of the Inca Empire. So I like this myth. I like it in the sense that it was likely something that was used to explain the divine origins and the civilizing role of the Inca rulers, but it's through it that we get our first glimpse of this connection to the divine in nature, this interconnection with nature that so characterized the Inca people. So what we do know for certain is that sometime between 1200 and 1300, the Common Era, the Inca people settled in the Cusco Plateau. And within 250 years, they had created the largest pre-Columbian empire the world has ever seen. The ruler most responsible for this meteoric rise of the Inca people was was Inca Pachacutec, also known as Pachacuti, who lived from 1438 to 1471, so mid-15th century. Here's a look at the statue of Pachacuti that was taken in the Plaza de Armas. It's the central square in Cusco. Pachacuti literally means the word literally means world changer, or he who shakes the world. In part because it was Pachacuti who took Cusco from a small hamlet and transformed it into the center of an empire. But he was also born at a time when his father, Viracocha Inca, having read an ominous message in the stars, had forewarned his people that their time on earth, the end of their time on earth was near. But when Pachacuti was a little boy, he had a dream. In that dream, he dreamed that the sun Inti had spoken to him and told him that someday he would lead his people out of these dark moments and on to unimaginable heights. And so, heeding the dream, Pachacuti set out to fulfill it. And it wasn't long before Pachacuti's empire stretched north and south, east and west, and Cusco became an eclectic hub of exchange. Soon all roads radiated from Cusco into the four corners of the Tahuantinsuyo, the land of the four quarters. Here's a look at the Tahuantinsuyo at the full extent of the empire. You can see it stretches from north to south. You can see that little white dot in the middle, that would be Cusco. Any idea what the word Cusco means in Quechua? Anybody familiar with that? Cusco? It means navel of the world, navel of the world, center point. It's the mythical and spiritual center point of the world, the mythic axis mundi that you see in so many cultures around the world, center point of the world. Here's a picture of a wall in Cusco. This is a picture I took many, many years ago one night as I was walking down the street in Cusco. And you'll notice that on the wall you have these enormous, you can't tell, but these are enormous blocks of stone that are cut out, hewn together to fit like a jigsaw puzzle. You kind of see how they're fit together in pieces. And if you look closely, you'll notice that there are angles. You can see these little juncture points. And I think this one has 10 different angles, 10 different juncture points that were carved. And each stone around it was carved to fit perfectly around that stone. And all of this was done with no metal tools. It's just incredible. They fit so tightly together, you can't even fit a pin between two of the stones. And so one question I like to ask, and one question I'll ask you is, why all angles? How come they're built with all these angles? Why are they, built like this? Why not just quadrilinear blocks slapped together? Any ideas? Anyone want to take a guess? Why are they put together like this? Why go to all that energy and effort? There's no mortar that's holding them together. I'm just going to say that. It has something to do, the answer has something to do with nature. It's something to do with nature.
Space as a communication tool. I was thinking it had to do with frequency. Maybe that frequencies are created by those junctures.
I like that. I like that. There's so much we don't know, and so much that it just expands our mind to be open to. I love that idea. What I was thinking about specifically has to do with earthquakes. Earthquakes. Yeah, Cusco and the Andes Mountains themselves, and even here in California, the San Andreas Fault, we're on the Ring of Fire. Lots of earthquakes. Lots of earthquakes occurred there. Over the years, after the Spanish conquest, whenever there was an earthquake, most of the colonial buildings fell to the ground. But the old fundaments of the old walls that were once existing there, the colonial buildings were built on top of these walls. They remained. And they remained because the stones were built together almost like an interlocking web. So that when the earthquake would shake, the stones would flex. They'd flex together. The idea was that these walls and their buildings, many of their buildings, were built in harmony with nature. From their perspective, nature was not a force to be controlled. Right? It was not something to fight against, but something to work with. And it says a lot about their perspective and how they saw themselves. and how they related to their world. We're gonna get more into this. And so I want to say that perhaps Pachacuti's greatest legacy was his ability to create a unified empire by leveraging one of the tenets of life that the agriculturally based people of the Inca Empire held dear, a valued principle deeply embedded in their worldview and approach to life. And that principle was Aini, and is today in many of the in many of the villages that are still that you still walk into. So Aini, what's Aini? Aini, the principle of energetic reciprocity. The principle of energetic reciprocity. In Quechua, Aini, in a social sense, roughly translates to today for you, tomorrow for me. Today for you, tomorrow for me. And so the idea there is that by performing selfless acts of service to others or for others, that produces goodwill. That in the end comes back to you as well, right? And so Aini formed the basis of cooperation in the Andes, a cooperative orientation to life that was very important for survival in the Andes. And I'm going to say that in the time of the Inca Empire and in many places today, still up in the Andes, agropastoralism was the basic mechanism of survival. So agropastoralism, what's that? Agro, the root word for agriculture, pastoralism, the raising of livestock. So farming land and raising livestock together. But in Peru, the mountains are very steep, right? And there is limited arable land. And I just read a statistic from the World Bank in 2022 stating that 3.06% of all of the land in Peru is arable. That's to say that it can be farmed on. So less than 4% of all the land. You can imagine what that number goes to when you're up in the Andes Mountains. There's just not much arable land. It's hard to survive up there. You had to farm land at one elevation and have livestock grazing at another, and it's very challenging. And this required teamwork. It requires cooperation, a concept that was built into the fabric of their daily life and socially expressed by the principle of Aini. Today for you, tomorrow for me. People working together. In fact, the terrain in the Andes was so rugged that infants weren't given a name until the age of 3 years old. And they were all called Wawa, Wawa. And then they were named with the proper name at the age of 3 years old due to the high infant mortality rate. According to demographic studies carried out by a Peruvian agency in 2005, the infant mortality rate up in the Caros community as of 2005 was 47%. So that just gives you a look at how challenging it was and how important it was for people to find a way to survive. And the way they found a way was to cooperate together, to come together, to work with nature. I love that. In fact, it was so challenging that even couples on their own had a hard time surviving, right? Because you had potatoes that are farmed at base camp, and then corn, which is an important part of their diet. It needs more fertile ground, which is about a 2-day walk down in some cases. And then livestock, which are typically the camelids like alpacas, llamas, vicuña. They graze at higher elevation where there's nothing really growing up there except for ichu grass and rocks, non-fertile land. And so people had to work together. They congregated together into village clans. There was something like co-ops where people cooperated together. And as long as you were contributing, you contributed your share, you received. No one got rich, but people found a way to survive. They found a way to live together. Right? So there's a look at how steep it can be up in the Andes Mountains. It's just astounding how they've stepped off some of the land there. Here's a look at some of the agricultural terraces in Machu Picchu. Actually, this is Machu Picchu. And you can see that those terraces were once, you can see them all. They were once farmed land. You'll notice that the facing of the retaining walls, if you look closely, you kind of have, I can see it on a big screen, but if you look closely, you can see that the walls are slightly inclined. They're kind of leaning back towards each other. And there's a reason for that. One of the reasons is that it helps them resist earthquakes more readily. But the other big one is that when they're When they're inclined back like that, they absorb the rays of the sun. They absorb the heat of the sun during the day. That's important because at night it gets really cold. And what happens with that heat is it's then absorbed into the soil and it keeps the plants warm. It keeps them from dying at night. Nights are more prone to frost and cooler temperatures. So again, here we see the Inca living in harmony, finding a way to connect with their environment. Machu Picchu is it's just a wonder that you start walking around and recognizing how closely related the Inca were with the natural world. All right. And so the genius of Pachacudi was in taking this deeply held value or principle of Aini that I've been talking about, this principle of reciprocal cooperation, and applying it on the government or statewide level. Right? There was no formal currency in the land of the four quarters, in the Tahuantinsuyu. So taxation was done by applying the concept of Aini on a large or governmental scale. So the idea there was that each community that I talked about that come together, these clans that come together, each community, they contributed a share of their agricultural production in exchange for protection and insurance against bad harvests. Right? And so as a result of contributions of food and other goods, huge surpluses were brought into the empire and stored in granaries called kolkas and storehouses called tambas all over the empire, and redistributed when people were in need. Right? And so I'm just going to ask you right here, what's that? Or what is that? Any idea? And some of you have been to Peru before. Maybe some of you have seen some of these. You'll often see these high up on the mountain sides, on the hills. Yeah, and I can see here in the chat, granaries. Yeah, these are Durga, thank you. These are granaries. And the name for granaries are kolkas. And so one question I have is, why are they so high up on the mountainside? And just to give you a little perspective on this, take a look at that. That's that same granary. You can see it on the right of the side. You can see it on the right over there. It's way up on the side of the hill there. So why so high? And what's it doing up there? Why are the granaries way up there? And again, it has something to do with nature, of course, because they lived in harmony with nature. They lived in symbiotic relationship with nature. It has something to do with a couple of things. One is the temperature up there is about 3 times cooler or colder than it is on the ground floor. This picture I took in the village of Ollantaytambo, which I'll talk more about. About 3 times colder up there, in part due to the winds that whip through the valley there. And so the winds that go through, and you might have seen when we were looking here, you can see how you have these slats. It's like a cooler, if you will. This is kind of nature's freeze dryer. And so it was full of potatoes, it was dried meats. And incidentally, how do you say the word jerky? It's dried meat, right? How do you say the word jerky in Quechua? Jerky. It's one of the few words in Quechua that we have in our English language. How do you say the word condor in Quechua? Condor. Huma. Some of these words from Quechua have found their way into the English language. But at any rate, you can see this. It's amazing kolka. It's astounding. Does anybody see anything else, though, in this picture? If you look to the left of the kolka, to the left of the granary, over to the left, you might see something on the side of the, kind of on the side of the mountain there. I don't know if you can see it on whatever screen you're looking at. I'll give you a little bit more guidance. How about now? Everybody see this? We see a profile. It's actually a profile of the mythic figure of Tunupa. And as I zoom in a little bit here, you'll notice that Tunupa wears a crown up on top. You can see the Inca structures in the shape of a crown on top of the head. I don't know if you can kind of see up here at the top there. That picture was taken actually from this vantage point. This is the temple fortress Ollantaytambo. You'll notice these large monoliths in the distance here. This is the unfinished temple of the sun. So from that spot right there, that picture was taken across the valley. And here's a look at one of our groups there. Wonderful people. They are now sitting in front of the temple of the sun, looking out across at the view we were just looking at. What's that? That's a storehouse. I talked about storehouses. Look at that. Just for fun, Can anybody find the storehouse that I just, this storehouse? Can you find this storehouse in this picture? I'm going to give you a hint. It's up high. How about right there? Can you believe it? Yeah, there it is up there. So we've got a storehouse up near the top of Huayna Picchu. Huayna Picchu stands for Young Peak. You have the ruins below Huayna Picchu. And on the other end of Huayna Picchu is actually the mountain peak of Machu Picchu, Old Peak. You have these two peaks on both sides, and you've got Machu Picchu below. Here's a look at the view from the top of Huayna Picchu. This is what it looks like as you're looking down at Machu Picchu. You can see the ruins below. When you raise your eyes from looking down and you look out at the vast expanse of mountains in every direction, it just takes your breath away. And you feel this deep sense of connection. And I mean, it's wonderful to be there with people, especially people you care about. And if you didn't care about that person, you care about them when you're up there. Let me tell you, that's what happens. The people up there, they bond. People you don't even know. You're standing there like, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. You just feel this deep connection from being up there. And so this principle of Aini that I've been talking about, right? This principle of reciprocal exchange, it served as a rallying point from the standpoint of social organization. But in truth, Aini was really much more than that, right? Aini was also an important, formed the basis of exchange on a moral level, not just a social level. So something along the lines of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But just as importantly, Aini was an important principle on a personal or spiritual level. As I mentioned earlier, from the Inca perspective, everything in the natural world was interconnected and suffused with spirit. The world they walked in, the very mountains in which they did their farming and weaving, were sacred to them. And they saw themselves as an integrated, inseparable part of Mother Nature, what the Andean culture refers to as Pachamama, who regularly poured her gifts of abundance into the world. Pachamama. And so in an effort to stay in harmony with this generative living world, they performed ongoing acts of Aini on a regular basis in the form of heartfelt offerings of gratitude. Heartfelt offerings of gratitude. They regularly offered chicha. Chicha was a highly prized drink of fermented corn that's still drunk in the Andes. So if anybody finds themselves in the Andes or anybody wants to go to the Andes, you may find yourself drinking chicha. It's delicious. There are two different flavors of chicha. One is a little bit more sour corn chicha. The other is a bit of a strawberry flavored chicha, a little bit sweeter. But before they would take a drink, they would, and they still do this today, they would make an offering to Mother, to the Pachamama, an offering of intention to the Pachamama before, of appreciation, of gratitude, before slaking their own thirst. They would make offerings of coca leaves in gratitude, and burnt offerings to the Pachamama and to the natural spirits of their landscape, on the intuition that one has to give, to serve beyond oneself, if one is to remain in harmony with the world, if one is to receive its abundance. Ongoing acts of exchange, right? Based on the perspective that the world in which they lived did not belong to them. It was not a resource for them to use, but rather they belonged to the world. And their well-being and the well-being of the world were deeply connected and intertwined. And so it was living according to these perspectives, reinforced by ongoing acts of Aini, that the Inca attempted to stay in harmony with the natural world that they were such a part of, right? And here's a little picture of that world. There's a beautiful picture of that world. And so during Pachacuti's reign, for the next 50 years after his passing, and I say, and for the next 50 years after his passing, the Inca Empire continued to flourish until one shocking event rocked the world of the Inca people and changed the course of history forever. Any idea? Any ideas what that event might have been? We want to take a guess? It's pretty
The conquistadors?
Yeah, that's a good guess. Yes. The contact. Contact with the European conquistadores. Conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors in particular. And that contact manifested itself in two ways that had hugely detrimental effects on the Inca people. The first one was that before the first Europeans stepped foot on what is now called Peru, the smallpox virus that they had brought with them to other parts of the New World had already filtered down and found its way into the Inca Empire. It's estimated that over half of the population of the Inca Empire, half of the people had died before the first Spaniards stepped foot on Peruvian soil. That's to say 5 million people had already passed. And so if we were sitting together in a circle and we looked around at one another, we would suddenly imagine half of the circle, a disconnection in that circle, and the resonance and energy that each of these people bring to the world gone. It's like that. And the second major event, of course, was the arrival of the conquistadors themselves in 1532, spearheaded by the conquistador Francisco Pizarro. After petitioning Spanish royalty and receiving his marching orders from the Catholic Church to conquer, pacify, and populate, he arrived on the shores of the Inca Empire to take what he could from the people and convert the heathens to Christianity. And so here it's important to point out that this worldview of the Christian Catholic Spanish conquistadors was very different from the interconnected worldview that they were encountering with the Inca, right? It wasn't about staying in harmony with the divine natural world through selfless acts of Aini, but instead, from their perspective, the divine, humanity, and nature were all separate and distinct, right? I mean, they saw nature as created by God for humanity, for man, as a resource to use to his devices. That was ultimately the perspective. And, here's an excerpt from their creation myth, taken from Genesis, the book of Genesis. Yeah, I see here, Philip, the doctrine of discovery. That's great. Yes. The book of Genesis. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Right? A lot of dominion here. From their perspective, man was not born from nature, not on equal terms with nature, but put in charge of nature, right? And therefore, humanity had God-given authority over nature to exploit it to their benefit. From this perspective, the majestic mountains of the Andes were not seen as sacred beings, but as mounds of ore to be mined. Right? Nature was seen as a resource for which man competed to get rich. And the primary resources they had come to get were gold and silver by taking it from the Inca people and from mining it and stripping it from the earth. Furthermore, the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors, were hot off the reconquest of Spain. I lived in Spain for 9 years. I spent 9 years living in Barcelona, and I had the great fortune of traveling all over Spain and Europe. And hey, Egypt's only a 4-hour flight from Spain. And so I got to do a lot of traveling and exploring, but I have a special affinity with Spain. I got to learn a lot about the culture. And during this time of the reconquest, the Spanish conquistadors were fighting against the fundamentalist Moors that had come up. And in turn, the Catholics themselves had become quite fundamentalists themselves. They had become quite dogmatic. In fact, the scribes that traveled along with Pizarro when they went into Peru during the conquest of the Incas, they wrote in their journals as they were recording the experience. They called the nature temples, where the Incas venerated nature. They referred to them as mosques. They were on a holy war, a bit of a crusade, if you will. They had come in the name of the one true religion, as they called it. and as well as coming to take what they could from the natives to get rich. They had come to win the New World for the Catholic Church, right? To save the natives, if you will, by forcing them to change their beliefs to theirs. And as you know, you can imagine that had dire consequences for the Inca. You know, so with this as a backdrop, in 1532, Francisco Pizarro and 168 men under his command, 106 on foot and 62 on horseback, made their way south into the heart of the Inca Empire. And here you can see a look there in red. If you follow the dotted red line, you can see the landing point in Tumbes, working their way down to Cajamarca, through Oaxaca, and eventually down into Cuzco. And so, you know, the story of the Inca and the conquest of the Inca, it's enthralling. It's a story involving greed and treachery. I mean, you couldn't write a wilder story and a sadder story, a more tragic story in many ways. You know, on our retreats to Sacred Peru, when we're in Peru, including the retreat that we have coming up in October, you know, when you're standing there, there's nothing like being there and seeing these two opposing perspectives that have expressed themselves in the natural landscape and then in the architecture. You're standing right there. You feel a certain resonance that's hard to explain, you know, as you experience it there in person. It's deeply impactful. And I don't have time to go into the story. I really wish if I could. We go into much more detail during our retreats, and you really get to feel it on a deep level. But I will say that the story involves the famous ransom room. The famous ransom room. Does anybody heard of the ransom room as it relates to the conquest of the Incas? Yeah, the famous ransom room. The ransom room in Cajamarca, you can kind of see it there I guess you can see it there on the slide, about halfway up. Cajamarca. That was the first meeting point of the Spaniards, the conquistadors, and the Incas. It's the place where Pizarro and his team of conquistadors managed to capture the Inca Atahualpa, the ruler of the Inca Empire, taking him prisoner and promising to set him free once this room was filled to the brim with gold. They actually they picked the tallest man among them who reached up as high as he could on the wall and drew a white line all the way around this room that I believe was more than 20 feet long. And they told the Inca Atahualpa that once that room was filled with gold, then they would set him free. And so Atahualpa sent orders to have the room filled with gold. And you can imagine llama trains were sent to the far reaches of the empire, bringing gold back. After 4 months of bringing in gold from all over the empire, including gold stripped from the most sacred temple in Cusco, the Coricancha, the temple of the sun that was bedecked in gold. At last, the room was filled. And I'm going to say that the gold that they brought in was not valued for its monetary value, right? By the Incas, it was valued. It had deep sentimental and ceremonial value. It was valued because of its color and because it reflected light, symbolic of their connection with the sun, right? And so at last, the room was filled to the brim. It's estimated that over $500 million by today's standards of gold filled the ransom room alone. Imagine. And so once it was full, do you think they let him go? You think they're just like, okay. Yeah. I mean, you can imagine that they used him. They continued to use Atahualpa. They used him to gain control of the empire. And when he had served his purpose, they told him they were going to burn him alive at the stake, unless he got baptized and converted to Christianity. And so Atahualpa agreed. And he agreed to be baptized. And so they baptized him with much pomp and circumstance. And then instead of burning him to death, they immediately strangled him to death. You know, an account of the event of the event states that they tied Atahualpa to a post. Then they came up behind him with a cord around his neck, and they girded and they tightened it around his neck. And the reports are that he stood as they put it around his neck, and he looked off up into the sky. And as they pulled it tight, he looked motionless, no expression whatsoever, just no fear before he passed. So the Spaniards, they then installed what they thought was a puppet ruler by the name of Manco Inca, who at first was sympathetic to the Spaniards, but once he saw their behavior and their blind greed and mistreatment of his people, he rebelled, finally fleeing Cusco high up into the mountains above Machu Picchu to a place called Vilcabamba, where he and his descendants continued to hold power for several more decades. Finally, in 1572, exactly 40 years after the first European had stepped foot on Peruvian soil, the last Inca was captured. And here's a look at that place he was captured. This is a look at Vilcabamba. Today it's called Espiritu Pampa, which roughly translates to plain of the spirits or plain of the ghosts. So 1572, Tupac Amaru, the last Inca, was taken from Vilcabamba down to the main square of Cuzco, the Plaza de Armas, which is still there. You can still see the churches that are in the same places, many of which are still there. Some were built after, of course. But he was taken down to the main square of Cuzco, where they baptized him and beheaded him in the main square, holding his head high as the church bells rang in the background. Here's a woodcut, that was commemorating the event, a Spanish woodcut. You can kind of see the event here from the Spanish perspective, if you will, the European Spanish perspective. I don't know how many people can read Spanish, so I'll do my best. No, I speak Spanish, but it's hard to read even if you do. This says buen gobierno, good government. That V is a U. Buen gobierno. Atopa Amaru. Le corta la cabeza el Cusco. So good government. Tupac Amaru, the last Inca, would cut his head off in Cusco. And here below you can see the Incas lamenting in the square. You get the whole picture here. And then after his execution, the Spaniards went on to destroy almost every Inca building in Cusco. They built a Spanish city over the old foundations and proceeded to colonize and exploit the former empire. And within a matter of generations, the Inca and their worldview had faded away forever. Or had it. Or had it. In 1949, nearly 400 years after the last Inca, Tupac Amaru, was executed, an anthropologist from Cusco named Oscar Núñez del Prado attended a festival in Pocartambo, located in the Andes east of Cusco. And he overheard two regal-looking native Andeans speaking what he recognized as a unique and distinct Quechua dialect, the language of the Inca. Anthropologists had believed that this pure dialect was no longer in use. And he wondered about the possibility that maybe these native Andeans might have preserved more vestiges of the ancient Inca. And so in 1955, Del Prado led the first known expedition to their hidden location, just today the home of the modern-day Quero community, 14,000 feet up, high up in the Andes, where he began a symbiotic relationship living with them, learning and documenting their ways. What he found was a people who conversed like the Inca, lived like the Inca, had preserved Incan spiritual traditions, and who in fact called themselves the grandsons of the Incari, the grandsons of the mythical first Inca who founded the land of the four quarters, the Tehuantinsuyo, and in their lore had bequeathed their spiritual tradition to them. And so by studying and living with the Caro, Del Prado, and others, I've learned some things that are of great interest to us today. I think it's great interest. First of all, uh, the people we're talking about here are the Caro people, U''ER, the Caro people. The Caro see the world as an interconnected and vibrating field of pure energy that we are in constant interaction with. The name for this vibrating field of energy is the Kause Pacha, or the world of living energy. It also translates somewhat like the realm of life force, the world of living energy. From their perspective, they believe that because we are fundamentally energy beings, all of us, we live in a world of energy. We human beings can never act outside of the Kause Pacha. We can only be conscious or not of its operating forces in our lives. Furthermore, from their perspective, the Kause Pacha expresses itself in two types of energy. So the Kause Pacha expresses itself in two types of energy. The first type is Sami, or light energy. Sami, or light energy. And the second type is Ucha, or heavy energy. So Sami, light energy. Sami energy is refined or ordered energy. It's the type of energy that suffuses the natural world, that's to say the Pachamama, in its pristine state. Ucha, on the other hand, is heavy energy or disordered energy produced only by human beings. And so when we're talking about light and heavy, we're not talking about light and heavy from the standpoint of luminosity. We're talking about light and heavy from the standpoint of density, weightiness. So Sami, the light energy, is characterized by a lack of density. It's high frequency energy. It conveys a sense of weightlessness. It's reflective of refined, unadulterated, unimpeded, free-flowing, ordered energy. You might think of that as high vibrational energy. Whereas Ucha, heavy energy, is denser, more low frequency, disordered, less free-flowing, low vibrational energy. You can think of Ucha as Sami, that is slowed or blocked by human thought and behavior. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And this energy, you can think of it as existing on a continuum. Right? Okay. Now, among the Caro live shamans. Among the Caro live shamans that are called Pacos, P-A-Q-O, Pacos, who are experts at accessing and mediating this energy. There we go. Here's a picture of Caro Paco, Maestro Don Adrian, who I spent some time learning from in the tiny village of Chua Chua, in the Caro community, around 14,000 feet. He's an incredible human being, an amazing person. I felt a real, genuine depth and connection with Adrian. But what's interesting is that the Caro believe that contact with the light and most highly refined energy is available to everyone. Available to everyone. So from their perspective, the natural state of all human beings is an integrated state with the Kause Pacha. And there's no energetic disorder unless we do something to make it so. So let's take a little bit deeper look at Sami. So Sami is the vibration of energy that is most compatible with our own. It's our original vibrational state, and so it empowers us. Sami suffuses the natural world, animating all living beings and imparting power to natural objects and places where it accumulates. When we come in contact with Sami at sacred sites like Machu Picchu, for example, or natural power places, we feel enlivened because the energy is compatible with the Sami that infuses our own energy body. That's the idea. Ucha, on the other hand, a little bit about Ucha here. Humans are the only beings that create Ucha. It can result from the human realm of emotionally driven thought and reaction that can disrupt the flow of light energy. The idea is that at our current level of consciousness, we can't seem to exist without creating disorder, without hurting others or undermining ourselves, or without upsetting the harmony of our environment. So ucha can't be avoided. And although we can't help but create it, it's a density of energy we don't want to accumulate because it turns the lightness of our energy body heavy like itself. And so the goal of the Karo is to gain awareness of their energy bodies and environment so they can transform ucha into sami and live with greater well-being. The more light energy they bring into their energy body, and the more they cleanse themselves of heavy energy, the more effortlessly they live in harmony with other people and with the natural world. And one way they do it, one way they increase their level of light energy and raise their level of consciousness is to interact with the Kausei Pacha by regularly performing acts of Aini. We've been talking about Aini, right? So we've talked about Aini from the standpoint of the social standpoint, today for you, tomorrow for me, people working together socially. We've talked about Aini from the standpoint of, well, from the moral standpoint, treating others like you'd like to be treated, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, so to speak. But on a personal, spiritual level, Aini is the implicate creative principle of the natural world, right? And it's carried out performing heartfelt, selfless acts of goodwill. So heartfelt, selfless acts of goodwill. And so you might think of it, in its simplest or purest form. The practice of Aini involves communicating with intention, of sending your love to one another, whether it's the earth, another person, an animal, or a tree. Has anyone ever sent their love? Anyone here ever sent their love to the earth? Yeah. Or to an animal? Or to a tree? I see, Judy, you're nodding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Linda was saying every day she's out there in the forests every day.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so every day some of us, like the Karo, are sending our love. We're feeling that connection. We're making an act of gratitude. I mean, often that's what comes along with this experience of love. I mean, I've had the privilege of having spent some time with some indigenous communities in Colombia and Peru and other places. And I'm always just so inspired by this feeling of reverence and love that I feel from many of my friends that live there, for the more than human community. I can remember walking along a trail way up high in the La Sierra Santa Marta in Colombia, and with my friend Leonardo, who's an Arahuaco elder. And as we were walking along, he was smiling, complete presence with me, and we were chatting. But a lot of it's just about being together, kind of that energetic reciprocity you feel between two people. It's just a beautiful thing, and we're not saying much. We're just kind of being together, occasionally saying this or that. And as we were walking together, I felt really attuned. There's just a great sense of attunement together. And as we walked, he kind of slowed his pace down a bit, and I kind of slowed mine with his, and then I looked down and there was a praying mantis, a really large, beautiful praying mantis, green praying mantis right in the middle of the path. And he kind of reached down, and with such love and tenderness, he picked up the praying mantis and he just was like, hermanito, little brother. And he went and just set it down out of harm's way, off the trail. And not thinking twice about it, we continued and walked on. It was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. You get into this place where you're really giving of yourself to the natural world. You sense that connection. Uh, Making offerings of gratitude, right? Expressing deep gratitude is another example of performing Aini. Being thankful for what the world gives you. And, giving back in humility and respect without expectation, you know, in the true spirit of giving. That's an example of Aini. For the Karo, every day is an opportunity to put oneself in harmony. It's an opportunity. And it's important to remember that Aini is not just an act. It's not an act without intention. It's not an act without intention. Right? And gratitude is not it's not a thought. Gratitude's not a thought. It's a deep experience, that comes from the heart. In the words of Carol Paco Antonio Morales, perfect Aini comes directly from the heart. So only then is our world a true reflection of our love and our action. When we act from this deep place of gratitude and love, we perceive our interconnectedness with all existence. And we perceive the world as sacred. And then the world mirrors back to us what we are, also sacred. And so there's just so much to be learned from the way of the Karo, and obviously from the people of the Andes today and yesteryear. And so I think now's a good time to kind of open things up. One question I often have is, what are the implications of this in our lives today? What are the implications of that? What does that mean to us? And how do we relate to that? Or I'm just curious what your perspectives are on that.
Yeah, I'm noticing in
Yeah.
the comments, it seems like a lot of us are wanting doing that, right? Being in ceremony or being just in gratitude, um, and I am so happy to see it.
Mhm.
It just
Yeah.
um, I think I've told the story before, but I remember once, sort of back in the day when I was told when you're going to go out onto land and do ceremony, you should ask permission,
Yeah.
right? And so I went out to do ceremony and I started to ask permission. And almost before the thought could form in my head, I just got this like, yes, please, please. And I had this sense that, like people used to do this, right? People, the indigenous people in our where we live, and around the world, they knew to live like that, right? And they created that Aini. They lived from that. And I get the sense that the natural world um, is is craving it, is really
Yeah.
missing it.
I love that. I think when we experience the deep sense of gratitude, then we feel that interconnectedness. We connect with the world on a deep level,
Yeah,
and we become more attuned to that, and it changes everything
it
about the way
changes
that we
everything.
yeah, the way that we see, the way that we touch, the way that we feel,
Absolutely right.
how we
Jackie,
what we
Jackie
bring.
raised her hand. Jackie,
Yeah.
go ahead and unmute yourself. Uh,
Yeah, thank you for your insights. I've been working on building a relationship with the forest in my backyard, with the world. And I don't know how to get my picture up, but anyway, I guess my question is, I've been really looking at the semantics and thinking that one place to start is
Mhm.
to recognize that we are the earth. We are not the world. And this is, to me, has become a critical distinction because the world is what we make from the earth. We are the soft clay of the earth. All the chemistry in our body can be found in the earth and its atmosphere. Our reliance on oxygen, water, and food is only possible when the earth is there reflecting back. We share 50% of our DNA with the tree. It reflects back, the water, everything. We are the water, we are the wind, we are the forces of nature, we are the balance of nature, we are nature we are earth in a human, humus, mud in that form. And that when we see that we are not the world, and it's to be very careful and not say that we are the world. You were careful to say, this is the world they created with the earth. They created that world with the earth. And it looks very different than our world. We created our world from the earth because, as you said, when Christianity came in, it said, oh no, that's just free Home Depot. That's for you.
Yeah.
That's resource, recreation, and scenery. And
Right.
that's the programming we have. And that indigenous languages, their semantics is 70% animated, and ours is, we have he and she, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Everything else is it. So it's very easy to destroy. When you objectify, then it's very easy to destroy, degrade, extract. And so recognizing that you take earth and you move the H and its heart, just what you were saying, these are not by accident. And that this is I just wish they would take the song and change it. We are the earth. We are not the world. And because we identify with the world, that's why we are on anxiety medication, because we believe we have identified with all the stuff we have made, extracting from the earth, changing its chemistry and making it it's toxic for us and for the earth. And so step one, you are not the world. And if we want to think with nature and remember that we are nature and that we are the earth, we are the clay, the soft human, humus, mud, then we can create a different world like the Incas did that was aligned with the earth.
Yeah.
That's how we get there. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think I just really well expressed, I think this worldview that you just mentioned, this worldview of separation, you said that there's an identification with the world, but there, at a deeper level, there's an over-identification with the separate self
Yes.
that then projects onto what we experience as the world and what we view as nature. I mean, in essence, the idea is, you are nature. The fact that we even talk about nature as a thing to get back to, it reflects this worldview. It's this worldview is the water we're swimming in, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It is. Our biology is the ecology. And as we look for technology to save us, it's really the biology is the key. The biology is the key because the whole universe is in the atom and the field is fluid. And now quantum physics just proved negative time. And so there's this space of consciousness that the earth is a part of it, that we are a part of. That is the biology, the ecology that is evolving as a neuron of the earth, evolving with the earth. The world, you always hear world finances, world view, world vision, but you don't hear that about the earth. You don't hear earth economy. You don't hear that.
Yeah.
But yet that's, and it's a very subtle but powerful, and that's how Christianity won.
Yeah.
That's how it won. It created separation. That book, the immortality key, where the guy spent 20 years going back to find the recipe of the Eucharist, the sacred tonics that were given so people could experience their expanded self in the quantum field, the whole entire unified field based in their own biology. The whole universe is in the biology, in the cell. It's right there. There's nowhere to go. And that's why they burned the witches. And that's why I think it's so frightening for people and so uncomfortable when you tell people, wait a minute, human, humus, earth, mud, because the last people that listened, that connected, that felt this understanding that they are nature in a human form, they are nature, they were burned. They were just like what you told the stories. That's what happens to people that listen, that align with the earth. But not now. This is the resurrection of the earth witch. This is the time.
Yeah.
I love that.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. And Mango wants to speak. So,
Great. Hi, Mango.
oops. I think I unmuted the wrong person. Hold on one second. Mango disappeared.
Okay.
So Mango, if you still do want to talk, go ahead and raise your hand again. There was a question about what's the relationship between the Inca and the people of the Amazon? because they're very different, right? I'm sure the worldview is very similar, but have you spent a lot of time in the Amazon, and can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can say I haven't spent a lot of time in the Amazon. I will say that some of the Caro, we know that they're high up in the Andes. I mentioned the Caro's community that's ranges from 11,000 to 14,000 feet. There are also some of the Caro community that are living up over the mountains and down into the direction of the Amazon. They're carrying on similar traditions. But I myself haven't had any experience in the Amazon. The Amazon is uncharted waters for me. I do know that from having spent time with indigenous peoples and their sharing about their perspectives. I mean, I spent some time in Colombia and talking a bit with some of the elders that had connections with people in the Amazon, that they do share a very similar perspective in the sense that they see human beings not as at the top of the food chain, but as stewards of the food chain. And I think that's one thing that hits home, right? This idea that the earth doesn't belong to us, but that we belong to the world and we're here to look after it, not just we belong to it. I think that those are some similarities that come across. So
And what is your ongoing relationship with the people that you've learned from and the people that you um, interact with in the Andes? Um, Philip wants to know if they've given permission for you to
yeah,
share.
thanks, Philip. I appreciate that. I've developed a beautiful relationship with one family in particular that happened to be related to a former Alto Mesomayak, and we have had wonderful interactions together. They've conferred to me um, the importance of actually sharing the depth and understanding of and the perspective that we're not the center of the world,
Mm.
that we do farm. We're not part of there. That we are nature. So that kind of summarizes that.
Um, Peter, I know Peter wants to know if there are places that are easy, like in Cusco or the Sacred Valley, where you can easily study with the Caro.
More and more, there are opportunities to meet up with Caro shamans or Pacos that are coming down from the Caro's community. Pardon me. That's something that can sometimes be organized. For example, on our retreat that's coming up in October, we will have a visit from some of the Caro that will come down and spend time with us personally, so we can commune and connect with them. But I do know that yes, that there are places there I have people that I know in the Sacred Valley that also have connections. So there are several opportunities for that once you're there.
And I'll put in your contact information as
Yeah,
well
great.
in the chat.
Thank
But
you.
Daryl wants you to speak a little bit more about your expanding or opening experience when you were 25 and how that influenced your worldview.
Well, thank you, Daryl. That was just it was one of these experiences where, as a child, I had the fortune of spending a lot of time in the Rocky Mountains, right at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. My grandfather had a farm there. It was a big 500 acres of just untouched virgin territory. And you can imagine as a child, this is more than 50 years ago, that just the depth of connection that I felt to nature, it really created a sense of deep belonging that I just thought was I just thought that was normal. And I felt deeply loved. I felt connected with nature. And then, as life does, you go through changes, you go through challenges. And at a certain point, in my teens, I had this deep feeling that something important was missing. Something crucial was missing. It had to do with a sense of connection, but I didn't know what it was. And I wanted to feel that kind of happiness that I felt, that kind of fulfillment that I felt. But I didn't really have any guidance. And so I kind of turned my attention towards the messaging of my own culture, which was about achieving, you need to become a high achiever. And that kind of fell into that pattern. And I thought if I achieved enough, went to the right schools and so forth, got the right jobs, that I would be happy. And I found out, at the end of, I was thinking my senior year at UCLA, I had kind of caught in this crisis of, I was just completely disconnected from myself. And I could see that my whole future was out in front of me, and I had no idea who I was or how I connected at a deep level to the earth, to myself, even to the people around me on a deep level. I lost that sense of connectedness. I remember reading the newspaper of the Daily Bruin, and there was a continuum, and it said graduation, it said birth, graduation, death. You are here. And so I cut it out and I put it on the fridge, I used to look at it and I said, yeah, that's, there's something more to life. There's a deeper meaning to life. There's a deeper reason I'm here. I need to find it. I need to find a way to connect to that. I don't have no idea what it is. And so once I finished with that, I got to a place where I graduated. I worked really hard and I decided I'm going to follow that. So I thought if I could just get away from my culture, if I could get away from what I felt like the superficiality of Los Angeles and all the messaging, then maybe I had a chance to somehow connect with that. And so I decided to just take off for a year. I thought I was going to put my whole future on hold for a year. I'm going to get to the bottom of that. Then I'll come back and I'll be a huge success. That was kind of the thinking. And so I wanted to go somewhere that seemed like it was off the beaten path at the time. I wanted to go somewhere close to the source. I didn't realize that what I really wanted is I wanted to go to the source of myself. I was trying to go someplace that, represented the source. And back in the early 90s, to me, that was something that was in my imagination, which was Spain. And what I liked about it was that it wasn't on the Eurail path. People were living like their ancestors had lived for hundreds of years going back, it seemed like. And so when I went there, my idea was just to simply simplify. Simplify. I got a little flat with a bed, a desk, a candle, and a journal. And I would just sit there and I went through this deep process of self-inquiry. I was writing and writing, into the wee hours of the night. And at a certain point, the questions started asking themselves. The journal started writing itself. I started channeling something on a deep level. I was peeling back the layers in a deep way. And I became so filled with energy, so filled with this, something that's akin to this light energy of just such flow and so connected that I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to know what that was. And so at a certain point, I thought, what if I just let go? What if I just surrender to this process of self-inquiry and follow it? And so it took all my courage, right? It was like, take the leap into the unknown. And I followed that inquiry all over the world. I spent 9 years traveling around the world. I visited over 100 sacred sites. I spent time with all kinds of people from multiple cultures, learning, deeply connecting. And I was so enlivened. I had a shift. That's where I started feeling this real deep sense of belonging. I started recognizing the importance of alignment within myself. It then led to a greater experience of harmony in my relationships with others and with the world. And that changed everything about the trajectory of my life. And so I'm blessed, I'm blessed to have had that experience. I love being able to share that with others because I see that shift, they're these unconscious patterns, these beliefs about who we are, this over-identification with our separateness, as we're talking about. It has something to do with the worldview that we've inherited that we're not even aware of. This worldview that we're swimming in. And once we can step outside of it, we can choose to connect in a deep way. And then every interaction is an opportunity for connection. And so I see people's lives, they change, they transform, and that's inspiring to me. So yeah, thank you for that.
Jude wanted to know, and I think this is, she said God was referred to in the plural, wanted to expand. I think that was the quote from Genesis.
Yes.
So you're asking if there's no written language, how was this recorded? That quote was not from the Karo.
Yeah, that was from the book of Genesis.
Genesis, yeah.
Yeah.
Ruth wants to know if you've ever done ayahuasca in Peru, and if so, how did that add to your ability to connect with the spirit?
That is a question a lot of people are asking, and a good one these days. In fact, a lot of people are going to Peru expressly for that type of an experience. That's something that can be done in the Amazon, obviously, but even in the Sacred Valley now, there are retreat centers where you can go and you can take ayahuasca. I myself have had other types of psychedelic experiences, but not ayahuasca. In fact, the Karo themselves, in general, they're not utilizing hallucinogens. It's all about command of energy on a different plane, right? Without the use of hallucinogens. I'm very open to that experience, but I haven't had it myself. I've had, like I said, other experiences. When we go on our retreats are not based on taking hallucinogenic substances, which there are plenty of great retreats where that's what people are doing, but it's more about gaining a certain command of energy within yourself, and where you begin to be able to choose to bring in that light energy within yourself on demand without needing any foreign substance, so that you can then begin to bring that into your interactions with other people and in the world. But yeah, I welcome it. If anybody is on the call that has had that experience, I welcome to hear their experience. Maybe you'd like to hear about that.
I know there are some, if people are
Yeah.
willing to speak about it. But so Philip wants to know about the reciprocity you were practicing with the people there, and whether you arrange to directly gift the indigenous people there that you work with.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, what was it?
He wants to know if you are gifting proceeds from your work to the people who in Peru.
Yes, I have been gifting some of the proceeds of my work to some of the people in Peru. Yes.
Yeah. Jackie, I think you've raised your hand again if you want to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, it came out recently that 38% of the tree species are leaving the planet. That's 1 in every 3 trees. And when they were sharing this report, the reporter was saying, "Why do you think this is?" And the person representing this international botanist group said, "Well, we've taken the habitat, the usual stuff you would think of, right?" But I started thinking of this more. What happens if you look at the earth as a living being like that you're talking about? You look at all the species other than us, because we're so self-focused all the time. But if you think of like trees and everything, they're all living beings. And if nobody likes you and wants anything to do with you, and every time they see you, they just want to cut something off you or extract or cut you or carve their name into your skin, there's a point where a human kind of wants to leave the planet too. You see this on social media all the time. If somebody feels degraded enough, they want to leave. And I wondered what your thoughts were. That I have a strong feeling that 38% of the tree species are leaving the planet because we don't share our love, our gratitude. We're not telling them we care about them. When we go outside, we pass a tree like scenery. We don't stop and smile and say hello. And I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I think this in this worldview that we are the center of the cosmos, so to speak, creates a perspective to see nature as outside of ourselves, right? And I don't treat whatever I view as outside of myself with the same reverence or respect as I would if I felt that I was part of that thing. And I love, some indigenous perspectives, and even I think Judy and I were talking at one point about, some of these cultures, people in some of these cultures that ask permission, to the earth, that they ask permission to the trees before they cut them down. I know that in Bali, when in the highlands of Bali, we've done a retreat there that's just fabulous, and we're standing in an outdoor pavilion, and the posts of the pavilion come from trees, and they don't just go into a forest and chop down the trees, and they select specific trees that they feel give them permission, that they spend time with reverence. They avoid certain trees. They went to other certain trees. They have a very deep intention around it. And then when they turn that tree into that trunk into a pillar, they perform another ceremony to of gratitude that returns the life force of the tree that was once living, in their perspective, it's still living, back into this living building now. And I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it, because when you're even in your building, your building is alive in a sense. It's the tree itself that's the reverence. It's an ancestor, if you will. So I think it has so much to do with how we see the world. And I think that if we were more connected within ourselves, I think it starts from within. If we're more aligned with ourselves, then we have a tendency to treat the world in a very different way. And that's part of what my work's about. It's not just about feeling connected. It's about what comes from that experience of connection. How do I bring that into my relationships, the relational world, not just my relationships with other people, but the more than human community, my relationship with Earth, my relationship with the trees, with the ecosystem. The human beings are one of the only species that doesn't contribute directly to the ecosystem. There's a reason for that. And so I've been privileged to have learned some things, but I'm always learning from people that are deeply connected to the earth in that way. So,
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. So our friend Anu Peter has a question for you about Lake Titicaca and being linked to extraterrestrial species, but also he has a lot of experience with ayahuasca, and
oh yeah,
I'm
good.
going to
Peter.
ask him if he would unmute and just say something
Thanks, Anu, Peter.
briefly.
Hi there. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Will. I'm just so moved by your presentation and your reverence for the work that you're doing. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, Anu, Peter.
Yeah. So yeah, my first question was, when I was first in Peru in 2007, I was hearing a lot of stories about theories of extraterrestrials somehow being connected to Lake Titicaca, where I think you said those first two Incan gods or whatever came down, as well as Machu Picchu, and theories about, do you have any thoughts about that?
I do know that the region of Lake Titicaca is connected with some theories around extraterrestrial visitation. There's actually a place close to the border with Bolivia, on the far edge of the lake, where there is a purported door that's carved into the limestone, and some people feel that when they come up across the stone door, it's a large stone door, that they feel some type of connection. Some people have reported that they felt connections that are extraterrestrial in experience. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge around that relationship with extraterrestrials. So, yeah.
Do you have your own personal opinion? I don't want to push you too far here.
I'll just say I am open to learn and to consider and to imagine all things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that dovetails really into my first experience with ayahuasca, which was in the Amazon on that same trip in 2007. I just did it one night, and it was an incredible experience with a shaman, a maestro. We were way out down the Madre de Dios
Oh, yeah.
river, and the night after the ceremony, we actually had what some people consider to be a UFO experience of this presence in the deep in the jungle that we weren't able to see, but you could feel it and hear it. And it happened a few times during the night. And this is after the journey with ayahuasca had finished, but we were still in that very sort of open-hearted, energetic state. And since then, I've been back to Peru in 2021 and studied with the Shipibo in the Amazon for a month.
Wonderful.
And I'm planning on going back in April. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
What an experience! What an experience! It's especially to have had that experience with such an open heart with the people that you were with. That must have been an incredible experience of sharing together that I can only imagine. That sounds wonderful.
It was. It very much opened my heart. Yeah, and I'm deeply grateful.
That's great.
That's what it's about, right? We're opening the heart of us Westerners. Yeah, it's funny because thank you, Anu. I was one of my teachers told a story about hiking, going up the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and they came across a film crew who were looking for UFOs, and the film crew asked, have you seen any? What have you been experiencing? And the guides said, no, nothing. We haven't seen anything. And so they said, okay, thanks. But our tour guide turned to them and said, "What are you talking about? We're seeing them every single night. They're here."
Wow.
And especially around Lake Titicaca. And the guides said, "Oh, we don't really interact with the ones that come in buses." He was talking about, there are extraterrestrials coming from a lot of different places, and there are some you want to interact with and some you don't. And I think that's what he was referring to.
Right.
So very interesting place, Peru.
Yeah, very interesting, and a lot of energetic resonance, when from my experience in Peru, I just feel a real resonance there on a deep level. And that I think is unlike many places I've been. One of the
Absolutely.
reasons why, when we do our retreats, we go to particular places for a reason. They have a certain resonance, a certain perspective, a certain worldview, a certain connection to the world, and they live in in a deep way of harmony. That's what it's about. So
And
I
that's
feel that.
that's that's where humanity is going,
Yeah,
hopefully,
that's the
in the evolution
direction.
of our consciousness, and hopefully,
Yeah,
the many millions of us who live in a Western society who feel disconnected or believe that we're separate will have this awakening. Um, I think that's where we're headed. I hope that's where we're
I do
headed.
too. Yeah,
So, can you let people know how they can get a hold of you? I put your website in the chat. It's
yeah,
willmonroewhittle.com.
yeah. That's a great way. So you can visit me at willmonroewhittle.com. Uh, there's also, on my website, you'll see a, a description of the upcoming retreat that we're offering to Sacred Peru in October. It's October 11th through 19th. It's going to be an amazing experience. A life-changing. These are life-changing retreats. So you come back in a very different way. I just was there in November with a beautiful group, and about 3 months before that, I was speaking with one of the women, and she was on the fence. She was deciding whether she should go. She was a little concerned about it being too strenuous. And I said, well, tell me why you want to, why do you really, what's your intention? Why do you really want to go on this trip? And she said, I want to find out something about myself. I want to discover something within myself. And I said, it's not going to be too difficult. I think that's the reason to come. Well, we will find a way. We have a team of guides that help anyone that we have alternate experiences for people that don't want to climb to the top of Machu Picchu, for example. But I said, listen, I don't want to convince you. This is something you have to decide within yourself. And so, whatever your heart tells you, that's what you do. And you let me know. And she came back in a couple of days and, she said, I'm going. And it was an amazing experience. Our whole group just bonded in a beautiful way, as they always do. But when she came back, we spent some time together, but as a group, and afterwards she sent me a beautiful message, and she said, "I am so full of gratitude. I mean, I just see the world in a different way every day." And my children, her children are adults, my children are telling me, "Mom, you got to just keep going back to Peru." Keep going back to Peru because, I mean, this type of experience changes how you interact in many ways with the world. There's a sense of alignment that occurs within yourself that then you bring into your relationships. Your relationships are manifold. And so, yeah, I think that's a great opportunity. So you can go to my website to learn about that. I also offer a course called The Way of Harmony. It's starting, I think it's the 25th of this month, and on Tuesdays from 10 to 12. It's a 6-week course. It's an online course. In that course, we're learning about specific tools. What can we do to build better alignment within ourselves? How can we connect on a deeper level? How can we tap into our authentic selves? And then how can we bring that? How can we harness this personal power in our relationships so that no matter what's going on, we're connected? And that's kind of the measure of your your personal power, not from a place of dominion, but from a place of connection. So that's
And
probably the website.
that's it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Will. That was amazing and
Judy.
beautiful and
Thank you,
heartfelt.
everyone.
And I feel elevated by that. So
So much.
thank you, everyone. And